So good afternoon, everybody. First, I want to thank you all for being here, attending the last UTIG brown bag talk of the semester in what has been a semester unlike any other for all of us, I'm sure. So because of that, I've tried to make this talk as much about my stories from the field as it is about the science that we gathered. So have you already given me hosting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So can everybody see that okay? Full screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is the tale of the elusive Ice Age coral hunters, Vanuatu edition. So, oops. So why use corals for climate records? Well, for one, corals can grow up to several centimeters a year, so we can sample them and geochemically analyze their aragonite skeletal material at monthly resolution to get a record of temperature changes over time. For example, averaging all the Januaries together, averaging all the Februaries together, etc., produces a record of climatology. Removing these monthly averages from the entire record, we produce a record of temperature anomalies, ideal for studying climate events like the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So this work, specifically the field work, was born from the merger of a couple challenges. Challenge number one, collecting coral is pulling sediment cores on a ship, for example. It's nearly impossible to intentionally extract coral because you can't actually see what you're drilling. If you're not on a ship, you could use a hand drill or a chisel and hammer, but you're not going to get beyond a few meters. So hand drilling is an excellent method for collecting the coral you can see, but it's hard to collect older samples with a hand drill or a chisel and hammer, especially if the coral is in situ or it's in its original location. So what is the significance of having older corals and how do we get them? Addressing the first question, my work focuses on determining the changes in frequency and magnitude of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO for short. ENSO is a climate event that recurs every 2 to 8 years, and it can hinder agriculture, fisheries, and infrastructure globally. So being able to predict how frequent or strong ENSO events will be is important. If we can determine ENSO variability in the past and combine this data with what we know about what caused those past climates, we can improve climate models and better predict ENSO variability in the future. So how will ENSO change in the future on a warming planet? Ultimately, that's what we're trying to find out. Excuse me. So the first solution is that we need a better method of collecting coral for paleo research. Something cheaper and faster than ship-based methods, and easier and more intentional than a hand drill or chisel and hammer. So we had to build a new type of drill, as you can see in the photograph on the right. Our land-based drill needed to be modular, powerful, and easy to position in hard. So the second challenge is that getting last glacial coral is even more difficult. There are locations where tectonics has brought LGM corals, last glacial maximum corals, to the modern surface, and one of those locations is Espiritu Santo in the Republic of Vanuatu. Sorry, I skipped a little bit here. First of all, that image there is a period of all the major proxy records over the last 1,000 years. And you can see that the coral records become increasingly rare over time, and before the year 1600 or so, they're almost non-existent. In fact, last glacial maximum corals in particular, no one has a substantial record from these coral-based climate records. So the last glacial maximum, or LGM for short, was a period about 20,000 years ago when ice sheets covered most of the northern hemisphere and sea surface temperatures were anywhere from 3 to 17 degrees Celsius lower than present. 3 degrees in the tropics and closer to 17 degrees in the Arctic. Also, since more of the ocean was locked up in the ice than it is today, sea level was 120 to 140 meters below present levels. So based on this information, whatever new method we come up with is going to have to reach corals that have proven so elusive for everybody else. So there are locations where tectonics has brought LGM corals to the modern surface. And one of those locations is Espiritu Santo Island in the Republic of Vanuatu, as you can see on the right image. This is a public island of nation of islands in the Western tropical Pacific. On the right, you can see that parts of Santo are uplifting at 5 to 7 millimeters a year, if you can see my cursor here. 100 to 140 meters over the last 20,000 years. In southwestern Santo, the LGM could be just a few meters below the surface. The Vanuatu coastlines are also rife with coral, and this is a region affected by ENSO-induced changes in sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity. In the left figures, Vanuatu is marked by the red stars here. I apologize for the size of them. And you can see that percent skill for detecting ENSO, changes in ENSO, is in the 60 to 70% range. So these regions here kind of fall right in there. So in Vanuatu, we have an ENSO signal, corals to record that signal, and those corals may be at or near the surface. So our NSF proposal was submitted for this work, and when it was approved, we built our new drill. It took a lot of testing and error to get the drill working right, and ultimately it took using it in the field to work out all the bugs and fixes. We shipped the drill and all the field gear to Vanuatu, and when it arrived, we flew out to meet it. So we first arrived in Port Vila on a different island in the Republic of Vanuatu in early September, and then took a small plane to Luganville, the main city on the island of Espiritu Santo. It took a couple weeks of clearing customs and collecting other supplies in Luganville before we could reach our final destination, the tribal village of Tanabusfus. So the route to from Luganville to Tanabusfus is only 40 kilometers, but it takes 2 to 3 hours by truck to get there. It's a very poorly maintained dirt road with multiple river crossings. So we had to figure out how to get all our gear, shown in the top photo, to Tanabusfus. We found a flatbed truck owner who agreed to transport everything, but it would take 2 trips to do so. Also, his truck was not 4-wheel drive. Load halfway to Tanabusfus. We got about 20 kilometers before he had to unload. At that point, each load was split onto 2 smaller 4x4 trucks, which is what you're seeing in the photo on the right. And this was just to reach Tanabusfus, a mere 40 kilometers away. The transport took all day, but we finally made it to the village. So I'm going to break from the work aspect of the expedition at this point and just to convey how amazing this place really is. Vanuatu is known for its waterfalls and its sunsets and just about like everything else you see geographically and geologically. And the people of Tendavusfus are always smiling. Chief Kalman is in the middle photograph, and I'm on the left. He was the chief of Tendavusfus, 28 years old, and he's the chief of like 400 or 500 people that live in the village. And on the right is Edwin. He lives in the neighboring village of Tasmaloon, and he was part of our crew as well. He helped us out a lot. So village life. Our meals usually consisted of root vegetables or rice, cabbage, sometimes seafood like sea snails, crab, the occasional fish, very little protein. It was usually prepared for us by the folks in the village. We prepared some meals for ourselves, sourced from our weekly to bi-weekly supply runs back to Luganville. We also had the occasional unwelcome visitor looking for leftovers in our sleeping quarters, which is what you see in the top center there. One visitor in particular was a poisonous giant centipede, and that's what you're seeing there. This is not the one that we encountered. This was one we ran into in Luganville at a restaurant, of all places. So 6 inches long, crawling toward my face in the middle of the night. Somehow I woke up with this thing inches from my hand, and I immediately shout, "Judd!" Judd is my co-advisor and the fieldwork lead, and is also sleeping in the bed/area of the floor next to me. So, "Judd, centipede." He wakes up, and we're both frantically trying to catch this thing while trying not to get bitten. Eventually we caught it and no one was injured, but safe to say I didn't sleep well for the remaining 2 weeks of our fieldwork. Luckily, it was at the end of our trip. And then on the right here, then there was the day that I thought it would be neat to go spearfishing with a snorkel and mask, no fins, wearing pants, long sleeves, shoes, and work gloves because I didn't want to meet a shark. I lasted maybe 10 minutes out there, and the chief, who's the other person in the photograph there, told me to go back, which is what you're seeing me do, trying to get my body out of the water, that he would spear a fish for me, then he would tell everyone I caught it, and he did. He caught a fish, and he told everyone Rob caught it. I couldn't keep up the lie, though. I had to tell everybody he did it. So drill life, work days were long and tough, but as our senior field scientist, Dr. Fred Taylor says, there's nothing that prepares you for the field like the field. The work was rewarding and it was the experience of a lifetime for sure, but it took some serious ingenuity at times to transport the drill rig and field gear from the village to our various coastal drill sites, as you can see from the picture on the right. When drilling was done for the day, we would pay a security detail to guard our equipment. Chief Kalman was a very diplomatic and fair man, and he made sure that members of different families in the village shared in the money we gave them for security and for drilling. And the scenery was pretty good too. You can see our main drill rig in the center here, and that's Brandon Minton on the right, using our hand drill with Fred assisting. So back to science. Over the course of 2 months in the field, we collected 9 main drilled cores from the areas shown in white, and 10 hand drilled and 3 chisel and hammered cores from the areas in yellow. The main drill cores were collected across 2 transects, cores 1 to 6, to the north, slightly to the northeast of Tendavusfus there, were collected along the coastline moving southwest, just above the high tide mark the whole time. And then cores 7, 8, and 9, we started at the coast and then moved inland about 80 meters. So across all 9 main drilled cores, we hit a total depth of about 107 meters and recovered 77 meters of sediment and coral. A couple areas of note. One was a 3-meter section of marine sediment that at first we thought was kind of a bust, but in hindsight, the sediment is rich with forams, and it could probably be someone's like master's or PhD sometime down the line. In particular, we also pulled a 2.5-meter continuous section of Porites coral. It's the genus Porites. So let's take a closer look at this Porites specimen here. So this is a 230-year-long coral and has been uranium thorium dated to about 15,000 years before present. It also grew during the end of Heinrich Stadial 1, which is a period of rapid onset of anomalously cooler sea surface temperatures. It's not glacial, but it's early deglacial, and that's definitely something. So moving on to the results from our hand-drilled cores, 10 cores, each no more than 1 meter or 2 long, selected specifically for coring because successful geochemical analyses have been performed on these genera, Diploastrea and Porites. And then the growth durations captured in these cores ranged anywhere from 60 to 300 years, which is, all of those are pretty acceptable for making a climatology. So the uranium thorium dates here in particular reveal that we have cores from the Younger Dryas, another period of abrupt cooling that occurred more recently than Heinrich Stadial 1. We also have a core that's been dated to the Bowling Alrod, which is an event characterized by a return to warming following Heinrich Stadial 1. And a core from the early Holocene, correlating with the return to warming that followed the Younger Dryas. So 3 additional cores were extracted using chisel and hammer. Genera and growth durations, again, are what we were looking for. And then the standouts here, uranium thorium dating revealed that 2 more potential climatologies from the Younger Dryas abrupt cooling event existed here. So that's it. Those are all our cores. And the oldest one is 15,000 years old, which is not glacial. No Ice Age cores. Did we spend a little too much time trying to teach Pacific Islanders how to hook 'em horns? Maybe. I've learned that you often go into the field with one set of goals and can come back from the field with a different set of accomplishments. So let's take a closer look at what we acquired by first looking at the Holocene-Pleistocene boundary. This is the temperature record from the Greenland Ice Sheet Project 2, or GISP 2. On the y-axis, we have degrees Celsius, and on the x-axis, kiloyears before present. So with this, if we could compare changes in ENSO during these warm glaciation periods to changes in ENSO during these abrupt cooling events, we could fill a big hole in our understanding of ENSO variability in a warmer climate. And now we have this opportunity. Warmer baseline climate records from the Bowling Alrod and early Holocene, and records of abrupt cooling from Heinrich Stadial 1 and the Younger Dryas. At first, I thought getting a 230-year-long Heinrich Stadial coral was the silver lining to this fieldwork, but we have all these other cores too, and it's more like the golden fleece. So it's all very exciting. Lastly, we still have this opportunity to extract Ice Age coral using our new drill rig. Prior work suggests the nearby village of Tasmaloon may have the uplift rate needed to reach these Ice Age corals, these elusive Ice Age corals. So the hunt for elusive Ice Age corals continues in Tasmaloon. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any
we've
questions?
got plenty of time for questions.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. I don't see any hands being raised, so I'm gonna click unmute all because I'm not certain if you're able to unmute yourselves right now. But
Cool.
fair warning. So now you have the ability to either mute yourself or shout out a question. Well, I thought that was really cool to see some of the field pictures. Are you planning to go back? I may have missed that.
I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity to do so. It's really all dependent on the next NSF proposal, which hasn't been submitted yet. So theoretically, that would be submitted in the spring, and we would find out a little while later. It's possible that I could be part of the next trip that goes back, but it's too much of an unknown at this point. I would love to go back.
I don't blame you.
Hi, Fred.
Any other questions? Well, I have one more if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you talk a little more about the hand crank drilling? I'm not too familiar with that.
Oh yeah, it's not hand cranked as much as here. Let me. So you can see on the picture on the right, that's Brandon Minton manning the drill, and Fred is holding the line to keep it out of the way and making sure that water is flowing. So what you can't see in the picture is that there's that water, that hose is intaking water directly from the surf right in the ocean. And it's feeding the drill, keeping it cool, lowering friction. And essentially, it's just a steel chainsaw that's been modified to hold a drill pipe.
Whoa.
So it's gas powered. I think there's electric ones too. And he's just sitting there drilling away. And this is, this is all calcium carbonate. So
yeah.
These drill bits, it doesn't take much. You really don't have to, push into it. The weight, a little bit of pressure, just the weight of the motor and then in the drill pipe itself just goes right in.
Very cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is Ian Norton. I got a question about the tectonic setting.
Mm-hmm.
What persuaded you to go to this spot in terms of tectonics? Is there some kind of
Man, at the last minute, I decided I forgot that I should have put a another image of the tectonics in there. But I'll see if I can go back to this original. Sorry, let me get back to this. Yeah, so I'll just explain as I'm finding it. So Vanuatu is located on the upper plate of an active plate boundary. So we've got the Pacific plate that Vanuatu is sitting on, with the Australian plate subducting to the east under, just to the west of it, but subducting eastward under Vanuatu. And the theory is that there's a seamount or a geo that's subducting directly under Vanuatu with the Australian plate. and it's forcing the island, especially the western portion of the island, to uplift. And this has been happening since at least the last glacial maximum over the last 20,000 years. The islands have been there anywhere from, I think, 5 to 22 million years. So we have this incredible opportunity to have all this ice age coral relatively close to the surface, where in an area that is not an active tectonic region, that coral is way below the ocean surface. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. So it means that in this part, effectively, the 13,000-year-old rocks are exposed at the coast. So if you go up and up, or I guess you can only go up further north, the hope is that you'll get up to 20,000 years.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, we got close. We got really close. I think we got close. I mean, we got within 3,000 years. And a lot of this was a shot in the dark without having dates. I mean, if we had had a date when we were drilling hole 2 and realized that while we were drilling it, we were at 15,000 years with that nice 2.5 meter long coral, we would have found a way to keep going. But a lot of it was a shot in the dark until we actually got some dates back.
The theme of our time, isn't it? Real-time tests.
I'm sorry, say again?
The theme of our times, real-time tests are needed.
Right, yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Rob. And thanks everyone for joining us. That was the last brown bag of the spring semester. So stay tuned for the fall semester, I suppose. Maybe we'll all be in person.
Awesome.
Thank you, Naomi, for organizing all of these.
And
Yes,
Rob, so my pleasure.
thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.